Hope no hackers get in the way.
Yeah. Well, we are live.
Oh my goodness.
And I just got an update saying your Hangout is live. Hangouts on Air is going away August 1st. Wait, what? Fun.
Well, cool.
Hello, guys. Welcome to this soon-to-be depreciated format. So, hello, friends, ladies, gentlemen, and friends beyond the binary. This is Subscriber Appreciation Day for June of 2019. For anybody who this is their first time here, please let yourself be known in the chat so we can all give you a nice, warm, glomping hello. But on top of that, this is a show I do on the last Sunday of every month where I use my significant powers of audience twittering and networking to get cool people from the internet to come and hang out with you guys and let you answer your questions. I see our Rebecca Castro is new. Hello. My guest today is a part 2 to May's Subscriber Appreciation Day. This is Sarah Zedig from We Need to Talk About Stuff.
Yeah, hello.
So last time you were supposed to be our guest, there was the original time. There was a tornado in Oklahoma or a tornado warning or a really bad storm that basically knocked out your internet. And then we arranged it for the next week. And then that next week, like Google or like Amazon's hosting servers went down. And so like half the internet went offline. And so I felt we were able to get a stream together that started something like 20 minutes after it was supposed to end.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's not fair to you, nor is it fair to the audience, especially those in Europe land where this is already like in the evening. So right. I decided to have you come back for the July show and give you a fair shake to hang out.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me back.
So for anyone who wasn't here last time, please introduce yourself.
I am Sarah Zedig. My YouTube show is called Let's Talk About Stuff. If you know me from anything, it's from one of two videos. It's either In Defense of ContraPoint's The Aesthetic or The Politics of the McElroy Brothers. And I also do a podcast called Trans Questioning, which is charting the course of my transition while also interviewing various people and talking about their experiences with gender. And yeah.
I did not know. Did you mention the podcast last time? Yes, you did. I do remember the name.
Yeah, it's weird. Anybody who does a podcast that's like radically divorced topic-wise from whatever it is that they're like their video content, you always get people who know the podcast and don't know your videos, or people who know your videos and don't know the podcast, even though you promote both on both. And it's always funny when people are like, I'll be on the live streams and I'll drop mention of my podcast, and people will be like, "You have a podcast?" Yes, I do, for over 1.5 years now.
Oh my. Well, I am embarrassed. Please tell me, what do you do on Let's Talk About Stuff? Like, what would you say is like the thesis statement of the channel, if there is one?
If there's a thesis statement of the channel, it's basically trying to show interesting perspectives on media. So I've graduated. I have a Bachelor of Arts in Film and Media Studies. I graduated this past December, which doesn't make me a professional. It just means I know the right words to use in the right order. But I read a lot of criticism, and I basically just think about media a lot, and I try to see what the field looks like for how people are engaging with any given piece of media. So something like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. A lot of people talking about that in terms of racial representation and interesting like artistic direction. So I take it like what's a read of that hasn't necessarily gotten as much pressure. And I'm thinking like, oh, in terms of you can read it as a transgender allegory, and the idea of the Spider-Verse as a way of giving the audience a means of identifying themselves within the narrative, and therefore like finding representation of themselves that they have never found in any sort of media. And there's like a brilliant sort of thing going on there with that film.
I remembered because when that movie first came out, like a lot of people drew their own spider characters.
Spider-sonas, yeah. And I was so excited by that, and the phenomena is like so fascinating to me. I'm going to do like an actual in-depth video about that sooner or later.
And then part 2, which is about Sonic and the same.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Okay, so we haven't gotten any questions yet, but we have gotten compliments on your shirt.
Oh, thank you. Oh, I forgot. I actually meant to change the shirt because it's a little bit weird, a little self-aggrandizing to be like, I'm a transgender YouTuber also wearing a ContraPoints shirt. I went to a DSA meeting yesterday, and this was the shirt that I was wearing. And I meant to change clothes, but I ordered food and it got here late, and I sort of got lost. But DSA, that was a fun thing. Also, just as a random aside, the DSA meeting, we got like a Sierra Club guy in there to talk about how direct action doesn't work. So that was fun.
Oh, what is life inside the DSA? Because like Canada doesn't have an organization like that.
Well, so this is actually my first time going to a DSA meeting, because it's a pretty small organization here, at least our chapter is, and I this is my first time being able to make it out there because it's just Oklahoma City is gigantic, but it was the people there seemed cool. It's just that this like it was all of us in one place. We talked a little bit about like some community things that we're working on, and then it was a guy giving a talk for an hour and 45 minutes about corporations in Oklahoma, and it was all important stuff, but it was also like kind of pointless and stuff that everybody kind of already knows. It was frustrating. I don't know.
Yeah, because I've seen that like DSA is like it is the closest thing America has to a quote unquote left-wing party, and so it has to still be really big tent, and it has everything from like borderline liberals to like I think I just saw recently that they have an anarcho-primitivist faction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, everybody that was there was pretty hardcore, like in the Marxist corner. It's just that the person talking sort of like it was not his crowd. And I think what's nice is that like the leadership of the club, I talked to them a little bit afterwards after the guy left, and they were all like, yeah, we weren't quite expecting him to be so sort of centrist in his messaging. So that was a good sign, at least. I was worried that they were like, yeah, liberalism. Yeah.
Oh, one other thing we got is someone also is excited that they're also from Oklahoma and that you should be friends.
Yeah, we live in the same state, therefore we should be friends. That's a good line of thought. I actually do need more friends in Oklahoma, but that's sort of my own problem to have. Oklahoma's a big place.
I was about to say, like, yeah, you'd be friends, but like the chance if you live in Oklahoma that 2 people know each other, and it's like less than a 6-hour drive because it's a huge flat state.
Yeah. No, my girlfriend lives in Ireland, and we were talking about like traveling places, and the idea of her being able to, she can go from literally one end of her country to the other in like a 3-hour drive, whereas my state from end to end is like 5 to 6 hours, and it's not even the biggest state in the country. This place is just the states are huge. They're ludicrously oversized.
And then when you get up here, to get from one end of my province to the other would take you nearly 5 days.
Woo! Yeah, that's big.
Canada's like weirdly massive.
Yeah.
And it has like 37 million people, and it is the second largest country of landmass on the planet. So like, that's
bonkers.
Always lots of space.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got some questions, and I want to know the first one, which I just got finished recording a video about, so I'll have lots of things to rant about. But they want to know what we think about the second Democratic debate.
Well, this is unfortunate because I actually didn't watch the second one. I watched the first one. May have gotten a little bit drunk at the time, dunking on them. From what I have heard, like the various like podcasts that I've listened to summarizing, it sounds like Kamala Harris was sort of surprising in her performance, and I saw her going after Joe Biden, and that was an excellent moment. She's a bit too much of a cop for my taste, but
there was a moment where she went after Joe Biden for being racist, and Joe Biden went after her for being a prosecutor, and I was like, they fight each other.
Yeah,
you just sit back and watch the.
Yeah. For the debates, I was surprised altogether. Castro surprised me quite a bit. I was not expecting to be as much in his corner as I am. I'm still probably it's going to come down to me either like Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren. That's sort of where I am. It's hard to see anybody else.
Yeah, I'm going to be going through this. I'm going to be following this pretty closely, and I'm kind of at the position of being there's on like the pure surface level as a jaded 30-year-old who's now this like the 5th presidential election I've followed.
Mm-hmm.
We would be considered, this is like the best choice that has been given since I started following politics.
Right.
But there's really like when it comes to policy, but also when it comes to things like as a DSA person, theory of change, theory of power, that there's still like Sanders still sits alone from everyone else, and there's a lot of things that I'm like the fate of the United States kind of rests on him winning in a lot of weird ways.
Yeah, that's kind of where I am too. And if I'm being honest, I don't have a ton of hope just because this country is not exactly voted in heartening ways lately. I guess there's been better turnouts in like midterms and local elections over the last few years since 2016, but it is still. You see a lot of people going after Bernie Bros, and that there is such a weird fixation on the optics of people who like a thing or a person and the way that they behave. And it's like, I'm sorry, I get how frustrating this is, but you got to step back and take a look at the bigger picture here and recognize that the stakes are maybe just a teensy bit higher than like how a sexist dude is going to behave regardless of who he stands. That's sort of where I'm at. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really hoping it's Bernie. I don't know.
There's the thing with like everyone, like I would say, like there's a lot of candidates who I would say are like the best Democratic candidates I've seen being fielded in like 2 decades. But we're like at the thing where like we're hitting the zenith of like balls that started rolling in the 1960s and the 1950s and 40s that have much larger and more fundamental stakes than like the kind of thing. So like if we weren't dealing with the oncoming apocalypse via climate change or the or a second economic crash leading to a resurgence of fascism, then yeah, I'd be like, yeah, like Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris and all them, like they're definitely proposing ideas that have been considered unthinkable my entire life.
Yeah.
But we're also dealing with the final like the as the World War II analogy, the Gunterdämmerung of capitalism, and the last decade we have to really turn around on climate change. Like,
yeah, good enough isn't going to cut it. We need absolutely drastic, just gargantuan levels of systemic change on every conceivable level, and there really isn't. There really aren't that many people up there who feel like they're willing or interested in doing that. And hearing people talk about, like, I don't know if you've heard about in Oregon. I don't know if this is still ongoing, but there is a vote for a climate change bill, or a carbon emissions bill, that they were supposed to. I believe the Democrats have a majority, but the Republicans basically abdicated the state. Like, they just refused to vote, and they just ran off to compounds and hired militiamen to guard them. And like, the Dems in Oregon were like, "Hey, no, we're gonna have to call the cops on you to bring you in to force a vote." And like, the GOP on this is just like, "No, we're not going to vote." And like, the main like GOP Twitter like retweeted this sort of gloriously, like, "This is the system working as intended," where it's just abdicating the throne altogether and refusing to let any progress happening. And this is a bill for cap and trade, like the absolute bare minimum, not a solution for climate change you could possibly hope for. And that's the issue that they are like playing hooky on.
Yeah, we have an entire province almost threatening to secede because we're going to put in a carbon tax that'll get us well below the targets we promised to at Paris.
It's the short-sightedness is truly staggering when you see like just how much the greed and profit of capital sort of just weasels its fingers into every little thing, and all you can see is the short term, like, no, but this is bad for whatever business, whatever lobbyists tell you. But it's like, no, the earth is melting. There's not going to be there's not going to be anything left soon. Come on. But I mean, the thing is that the wealthy are always going to have money to buy compounds and hire PMCs to protect them in the case of the absolute worst. So it's, yeah, we need some radical change.
Someone said they're guessing that province is Saskatchewan. It is not. It is Alberta, and Alberta is a province that has basically one of the worst cases of Dutch disease on Earth, and that's why they're so adamant about it.
What's Dutch disease?
It's when the economics of a region start to get, like, when an economy is so dependent on a single resource, it starts to do weird things to the other economic functions. Like, other areas start to collapse because it like hyper focuses on something, and normally this is fossil fuel. So like, for like fighting Dutch disease is like how Norway put in the capital fund, where like they produce oil, off-sea oil, and so in order to keep themselves from having Dutch disease, they are building a capital fund, which is that they're taking oil profits and making this huge pile of money for basically transitioning out of it once they're done with oil. Dubai is doing it with Dubai, like, with all the buildings and the new business sectors and everything like that. But Alberta has not invested in anything else.
Yikes. Hold on just a second. My dog is demanding to be let out. Give me just a second.
All right, no problem.
Sorry.
I will entertain people and smile. Hello, everybody. How's the chat going?
Okay.
Let me see if I can find a little bit more of better description of Dutch disease real quick. Yeah, it's the apparent causal relationship between the increase in the economic development of a specific sector and the decline of other sectors. Usually when a region that has some sort of primary resource is economy that has some sort of very strong primary resource economy lets secondary resource economies suffer. Like when you have oil and then you decide to forego having any other industry, which is happening to Alberta. But the problem, the locked trap that Alberta's in, is that Alberta's oil is not like easy to access oil. It's called bitumen tar sands,
Yes.
or oil sands,
Yeah.
which are only profitable if oil is above a certain price.
Mm-hmm.
And if oil ever drops below that price, like what happened a couple years ago,
Right.
the entire Albertan economy like tanked for like 2 years.
Yikes. Yeah, that's bad. Oklahoma has kind of a situation like that, except that it's like the government very, very, very stubbornly refusing to do any sort of diversification. We're a very big oil and gas state, and the thing is, we're one of the windiest states in the country. There's a musical called Oklahoma, and the first line, if anybody knows any lines from the title song, it's Oklahoma, where the wind comes sweeping down the plains. And we have, like, this is a great place. It's flat. It's a great place for windmills, but they've actually, like, the government's gone out of its way to make it difficult, bordering on impossible, to build wind farms in Oklahoma, and like taxing people for putting solar panels on their rooftops, basically disincentivizing any and all renewable energy. And like there are a lot of wind farms in Oklahoma owned by other states that they generate their electricity here, and it gets returned to like Kansas and Colorado. Like, that's pretty cool. And I just found out yesterday that OGE, Oklahoma Gas Electric, owns a coal factory, and they recently, or a coal power plant. They have been raising prices on basic utilities in order to subsidize their coal power plant because they don't want to replace it. And it's like, the thing is that a lot of our economy comes from oil and gas, and the various oil companies are everywhere. You can't go anywhere in Oklahoma without seeing their logos sort of plastered on everything. And they've done a very good job of propagandizing themselves such that everybody kind of seems like, well, no, part of the reason why Oklahoma City has been growing is because of oil and gas. So of course they wouldn't do anything wrong. And like the idea of like renewable energy is like everybody buys into the idea that renewable energy is somehow bad and that climate change is a myth. And it's really frustrating.
I can imagine. Isn't Oklahoma also one of the places that really got into fracking hardcore?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Oklahoma started fracking, and within a couple of years had like a 1,000% spike in earthquakes. I experienced a bunch of them. Like, I've lived here a long time, and it's hilarious. I remember like the idea of an earthquake was silly, and then for about like 3 years, there was like an earthquake every week. And I remember being in my 8th floor room on my college campus at the time during one of the bigger ones, and feeling like the floor almost kind of drop out from under me. And there was this weird feeling like none of the architecture in this state is built for earthquakes. Thankfully, they got sued and were forced to like change the pressure of the water they're using for fracking, and therefore like the earthquakes have more or less ceased. But that's still like a really intimidating kind of thing. Fracking is a big deal here. We really like environmental degradation in this state. It's a bad time. Yeah.
Did you ever accidentally set your water on fire?
No, that has not been a thing. I have not experienced any like distressingly awful like tap water, but I've always lived in like I'm in Oklahoma City now. I was in Norman before, and then I lived in Stillwater, it's just a smaller town, but it's where OSU is. So like everywhere that I've lived has been big enough that if that like I know people who've lived in some of the smaller towns where their tap water is like yellow. I've never experienced that though.
I've actually been to Oklahoma City before.
Oh wow! What was the occasion?
I was a kid, and my parents were really into road trips when I was a kid, and we did a bigger trip of the Southwest, and we went through it. I remembered because we made a pit stop by the Oklahoma City bombing memorial.
Yeah.
And also, I did a lot of research on it because Oklahoma City bombing was a kind of pre-9/11 terrorist attack that I use as a comparative case when studying 9/11. So
it's very important. Yeah.
Yeah. There was a time in the late 90s, friends, where everyone thought that the biggest terrorist threat to America were lonely libertarian guys who live in the woods.
Oh, what a time.
Mm-hmm. That was when like middle-class white people had so few things to worry about that they started getting into like alien conspiracy theories and stuff.
I kind of miss the 90s in that regard because it was a time when the conspiracy theories were huge, but in kind of a fun way, where it was just like silly, like they're just these like look at these weirdos and their fun little theories. And it was a lot more fun when you didn't recognize how like racist and sexist they all were, and they weren't like getting funding from thousands of people.
Yeah, that's why I cringed so hard when they were bringing X-Files back, and I was just like, "Oh no, you can't do that today."
No. X-Files, like its time has passed. The not without like a major rethinking of it. Because like the nature of conspiracy theories has changed exponentially in the last 20 years.
If I remember correctly, they actually were like going to dress like 9/11 truthers and like stuff like that. And I was like, oh, no, don't do that.
Yeah, that's definitely a thing to do. I don't know how you would do that in X-Files without it being like laughably bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so second question.
Yeah.
So we're on form. Someone was saying, why were they saying that direct action didn't work?
Basically, their specific point was that, and their point is not unfounded, that a lot of like the DSA and a lot of other activist organizations in Oklahoma don't have the numbers to do the kind of direct action that really makes a lot of difference, and that you have to work with the system as it exists, which I agree with. But there is a point that, like, yes, Oklahoma, it's harder to find the activist community and like the numbers. It's harder to activate the average person here because a whole cavalcade of reasons. But what frustrates me about that answer, we were talking about specifically about utilities raising prices in order to subsidize their own poor planning, basically. And we were asking, so is there anything that we can do about that? Like, because he was advocating like run for office, join Sierra Club, and like participate in like suing these corporation commissions. And it's like, but do you have any other suggestions for action to take? Like, is there anything you can do against OGE to make a difference? And he straight up just said no. And that's just not an acceptable answer. And the thing is, like, it's okay to say, I don't know, I think, because it is an open question. But the idea of like going out to protest is a waste of time and energy, when the fact is that like that can bring optics to a situation. And if more people recognize, like, the Oklahoma had a teacher's strike when like West Virginia and whatever the other state was that participated in the teacher strike last year. it was a ripple effect where like the teacher strike happened in West Virginia, and then a handful of other states did the same thing, and Oklahoma was one of them. Oklahoma is a pretty staunchly anti-union state. This is a right to work state. And so that wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for the optics of more like direct action happening elsewhere. And so even though me and like 30 people going out to the front offices and like keeping people from entering in this building won't really affect anything on their bottom line. It's not really going to like change the world. If people like see it, if it becomes optical, that's something that people see, and that can lead to a trickle effect. And it's just, I get frustrated with anybody who says my way of activism is correct and your way is wrong. The thing is that there is room for every strategy, and there needs to be as many different strategies going on simultaneously as possible, because this is a big problem that has many, 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 many prongs. And as long as there's more than one person in the movement, there's more than one way to go about it. And it's like you're not splitting your energy. It's the same sort of thing as saying, why aren't scientists trying to cure cancer? Why are there scientists studying tropical tree frogs? And it's like, that's not that you're missing, you're making a lot of assumptions there. There's more energy, there's more time. I don't know, I'm going off on a lot of tangents there. Oklahoma is a frustrating state for activism and for trying to make a change, because Oklahoma has a long history of socialism in the early 20th century. And it bought really hard into the Red Scare and sort of did a hard right turn in the 60s and sort of just has kept going. And now the state is like lobotomized and gutted, and it's hard to know how to fix it, which is really frustrating, in part because one of the larger Native American populations is here. There's like, I think 83 federally recognized tribes operating in Oklahoma, and they're the ones who are going to be impacted the most, and they're the ones who get the least the least like coverage in this, and the least, seems like the least public power. It's very frustrating.
If I remember correctly, Oklahoma was originally set aside to be indigenous territory.
Yes. There's actually a big Supreme Court case going on right now about that, because it was all set aside as indigenous American land, and of course we sort of decided we want that land back because we got to settle. And so there was a murder case whose location was debatably on reservation land that was handled in the federal courts that should have been handled in tribal courts. And a lawyer who has now passed away, I think this case happened in the 90s or the early 2000s. There's a podcast called This Land that is specifically about this case that's going on right now. But the investigating the jurisdiction of tribal land, this lawyer uncovered basically documents that weren't properly signed and notarized that basically say that like something like 70% of the land in Oklahoma is legally still in possession of indigenous tribes. And it's up to the Supreme Court now to decide whether Oklahoma belongs to the tribes or to the state of, like, the government of Oklahoma. And it's a huge thing that not a lot of people are talking about, because it makes everybody in the Capitol terrified for obvious reasons.
Yeah, and of course, with the Supreme Court the way it is now, I'm sure it's going to go just fine.
Well, this is the thing. They need, according to this podcast, they need 4 votes in order for the Oklahoma court ruling to be upheld. And there's 4 left-leaning judges, but it's actually Ginsburg who is they're not sure if they're going to have her vote, because she has a very bad voting records on indigenous rights. Yeah.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah. So it's questionable. It's not entirely a lost cause, but it's like it's hard to say, you know.
But she's a badass and she works out and she's so great in
Yeah,
RPG action figures.
yeah. Maybe don't mythologize human beings. I don't know. Maybe people can do good things and bad things also. I don't know. Shrugs.
Mm-hmm. All right. This is the next question. This is from the Oklahoman in the audience.
Hmm.
So Rebecca Castro says, lots of people on BreadTube do recon on shitty parts of the internet. Natalie said she used to be on 4chan. How important is this? Is it for de-radicalization or counter-protest? Do we need to do it more or less?
I think it's important, and I think that as far as like, do we need to do it more or less? I have no way to answer that, because I guess for me personally, I think that less it would be my answer, because my opinion is if you know Innuendo Studios, Ian Danskin, his alt-right playbook YouTube series, what he does is he takes he generalizes figures and ideas and takes them down to the abstraction of, like, say you're talking to this person about this thing. By addressing the ideas directly and removing the context of like the direct individual, you're allowed to boil it down to the rhetoric, and I find that to be very specifically valuable for me. I find that far more interesting. Like I enjoy a lot of the like dunking on like channers and folks on Reddit, but I don't know how effective that is. But they also say that they get messages all the time from people who said, I was a channer, I was a TERF until I saw your videos and I changed my mind. So you kind of have to trust their word when they say that they get a lot of messages like that. And I think that it comes down to different strategies on different, like not everybody has to do the same thing. And I think that I'm butting up against this a little bit with folks insisting that there is a right way and a wrong way to be a left tuber. And for me, it's like there's so many different ways, because YouTube is an open platform for everybody. If the idea is that we want to help bring people further to the left, you want as many different kinds of content creators making left-wing content in the way that speaks to them, because that content might speak to different people in the audience more specifically than like somebody else. I think it is important for somebody like Natalie to like spend a lot of time digging through 4chan and seeing like what the incels say. But I think it's a mistake to assume that that's something that you should do, because that is dangerous for your mental health and potentially very health. And physical. Yeah, exactly. It's just dangerous in general. And you have to be aware of, like, I think it's important as a creator that you take care of yourself. I worry about Sean a lot, because every single one of his videos, I just think like the amount of time he spent doing research for this, just watching the most miserable, nightmarish right-wing garbage. I don't know how you do it. I try to talk about things that I love, and I try to inject left-wing talking points into those conversations. My dog is demanding to be let back in again. I'm sorry. Give me just a second.
Dog and a dog.
Welcome back, princess. Okay.
So to kind of juice up on that, I was at Thoughts Line's birthday party yesterday night.
Oh.
And we were having a conversation about this exact thing, about the response video. And one of the things that we were both talking about is that the response video seems to have a really good, like, aside from the de-radicalization versus counter-protest, like, it has a good SEO function in that,
yes,
like, writing about why an idea is bad seems to be even if you're educating, even if you're discussing things, using the case of the response video is a good way to get somebody into the video that you can then do things. And I was talking about this because I'm kind of trying to pivot in that direction a little bit over the next few months. And one of the things it's like, well, like, look at how Ollie teaches philosophy using response videos, or how Three Arrows teaches history using response videos. And it's like, oh, but there's a really good point to that. And like, we were talking about it because like some of the most successful videos seem to be in that vein.
Yeah, I mean, my two most successful videos, one is looking at one particular video by ContraPoints and seeing kind of the themes that we can draw out, and like asking questions about what is YouTube art, and like leading more into how, like, identity politics within leftist movements. And then the other one is looking at the works of the McElroy brothers and seeing how we can read their like ideological message as more or less communist. And that's sort of, those two videos are, I think, my most successful, because there is like a leading question, and you're like searching for like the McElroys, like, oh, the politics of the McElroy brothers, does this mean they're hashtag canceled? And then you watch it and you're like, oh, this is kind of funny. And then I sneak in at the end with, oh, this is about fascism and communism. Like, I think it's a good strategy if it's deployed well. It's easy to fall into, I think, like dunking on people and being petty, but even the pettiness is fun. I don't know. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. It kind of just depends.
Yeah, one of the things that sticks out about that video too is that I don't think that I've seen anybody do that like deep of an analysis of the podcast as the medium, which I think was kind of cool. Like, I've never seen somebody like maybe there was a couple when like Serial was like at peak Serial back in 2014 or whatever, but I hadn't seen very many of like media critiques of podcasts, and so I thought that was really cool.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to do more of that. Now that my podcast is in like a network, and I'm talking to people who do podcasts all the time. I've been thinking more and more about the medium and how it's like both incredible and terrifying. And you look at there's one of my favorite podcasts that I tend to quote a lot is Behind the Bastards. There was an episode recently that was talking about this basically snake oil salesman who was hugely popular and was responsible for doing like goat testicle implants, like putting goat testicles into men for like virility. And he bought this giant like radio station that you could, his tower was strong enough that you could hear it like all over the country. It was the most powerful by far. And he almost won election a number of times entirely because people trusted him, because this was a time when like the idea of having somebody sort of speaking into your ear in a friendly way through the radio just hadn't really happened as much. And so they felt like they knew this guy in a way that they didn't know many people. And I've just been thinking about that a lot. Like the podcast is a medium. It's you broadcasting your voice. Like, I'm walking around and I'm listening to the McElroys just dunk on people for a while, and it's like fun. It's funny. But I feel like I know them. I feel like I'm in the room, and it's weird. It's this weird disconnect of like, it's a very easy way to fall into like a parasocial relationship. And I think it's very easy for podcasters to abuse that relationship.
Yeah, it does seem though like it doesn't, not a thing. It's a kind of outside of the scope of the video, but like it's a thing that the McElroys obviously became aware of, and they've kind of retreated from their social media for that purpose.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's funny because actually Shannon Sturgey's kind of, if you follow her Twitter, she's starting to go through the Adventure Zone, the later half of the Adventure Zone now.
Yeah, she is.
and just talking about how like you realize that like everybody is kind of like derails the story to just give Griffin endless shit, and it's like, yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm currently getting caught up on the new show, and
I really like Amnesty. The most recent couple of episodes were excellent, in my opinion.
I am currently in, I think, the arc that they were in around April-ish.
Okay.
The last episode I saw, I think, involved them trying to use a Ouija board to talk to a corpse. So, like,
yeah. Oh gosh, yeah, that one's good.
hey, Mia Mulder's in the chat. Hello.
Oh, Mia Mulder, my friend. Hello.
The Power Swede.
Yes.
We'll be seeing her soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're having early talks about maybe doing something regular show.
Oh,
together.
nice. That's exciting.
Yeah. Okay. Next question we got here is, so this is from Gad Yariv. Right-wingers complain that media companies are left-wing, like Google, because they're not as anti-LGBT. Is LGBT a left-wing cause once corporations adopt pro-LGBT policies?
I think LGBT rights is not a left or right wing cause. I think it's a human rights thing. And I think the idea of like Google having a left wing bias is sort of like left leaning in the like traditional American sense. Yeah. But I mean, people on the far left kind of laugh at that notionally. When it's like it's LGBT creators and like far leftists who get censored by like YouTube far more often than folks on the far right.
Mm-hmm.
I think part of the problem for me is the fact that LGBT rights becomes a political piece that you place on the spectrum somewhere, where it's another thing that corporations like levy, and it's like Chase Bank sponsored like with a rainbow logo. And for me, I that entire aspect of things is basically them trying to reincorporate the resistance inherent to the existence of people who break societal norms in their sexuality and gender and try to make money off of it. I resist every corporation that tries to make LGBT identity like a centerpiece of its like public facing image when it doesn't seem to show any interest in actual substantive like activism or change, and painting it as a right wing, left wing issue. I don't know. I don't even know how, because it's, to me, it's very clearly like human rights, and I feel like it should be in the same category as immigration. It's like that's a human issue. That's not it shouldn't be a political issue. I guess we're dealing with how things are and not how they ought to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's it's a tough, because like there's a lot of issues that are, like you said, about human rights that are then panned onto a spectrum, that a political spectrum that's really about whether or not you believe in the distribution or consolidation of political power.
Yeah.
And I mean, maybe you could argue that there's something to like about lifting up marginalized groups is in some way a distribution of power. But like at the same time, like there's like, I just read an article today that came out about a list of corporations that rainbowed their logo, but still donated more than $1,000 to anti-LGBTQ politicians.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's basically like there is a distribution and visibility of saying like we are happy to exploit you just as much as we exploit everybody else. It's sort of like embracing the existence of marginalized people as a way to win in the liberal like court of ideas, sort of like high five, we've embraced gay people, but it's the idea of like saying the words I support LGBT people means absolutely nothing if you aren't doing something to back those words up. And that's sort of the place that corporations are in, you know?
Yeah. I live fairly close to like the gay village of Toronto. And so everything is rainbow washed. And at the Pride Parade this month, I just remember the big ad that was like two men and a couple with a nice pearly set of wonderful teeth, and then it was an ad for Crest, and it was like, oh yeah,
oof, yeah,
Crest, and then like how the Pride Parade was over 50% corporate floats. It's like, yeah, okay,
yep,
yeah, this is a thing.
Yep, it's not great.
Yeah, but I do. So I could see a argument that there is a left-wing aspect to being pro-human rights, in that like I said, if you see it as whether or not you consolidate or distribute power, but these are really like not things that these are things that we think should be settled, right? Not like,
yeah, it comes back to that classic refrain of I don't know how to tell you that I think you should be nice to people. That's sort of where it comes to me, is like I don't see how it's a political issue that we're one of the wealthiest countries on earth, but we don't have enough space or money to spare for people displaced by conflicts that we largely caused. And Doughboy DeVito in the chat says human rights aren't profitable, and yeah, that's basically what it comes down to. At least not in the short term, and that's all that anybody can think about right now is the short term, because everything is breaking down in the long term. So they're just trying to hoard up as much wealth as they possibly can. I don't know.
Before they go to Mars, and then they build walls.
Build a wall around Mars and keep us all out, I guess.
Who'd have known that the most accurate depiction of what our future is going to be like was the goddamn movie Elysium?
Oh no, you're right. Yeah, I need to rewatch that movie.
That movie was like, okay, so like the thing about Neil Blomkamp is like his politics seem pretty good, but they're so like it's so inelegant that it was like when I remembered when they like crashed onto Elysium and they're like, we detected undocumented migrants on Elysium station, send in Homeland Security, and it was like, oh my god.
Yeah, Neil Blomkamp is by no means like inelegant is the best word you could pick for that. He is not an elegant director. I still adore his films because they're not quite like anything else, and people like get onto him for being heavy-handed. And it's like, yeah, but I'd prefer heavy-handed sci-fi over sci-fi that pretends it's not about anything. That's kind of where I'm at.
What makes me really sad is that there was talks he was going to get an Alien movie that got stopped.
Yeah, that stopped and then started again, and then Ridley Scott came in and said, "No, oh, people are interested in an Alien movie again. Looks like it's time for me to make more bad movies."
Oh, jeez.
I don't like Ridley Scott. That's sort of my hot take. Even though I have, probably can't even see it. I have Blade Runner up there, but
nice.
Whatever.
Yeah, me in the chat. There are some directors who use subtext. They are all cowards.
Yeah.
There's like a difference between like subtext and then in that one text, or in the case of Elysium, super text.
Yeah. It's very much like a child's fable in terms of its ideological argument, but there's something like charming about something that's just really, really, really heavy-handed to me. I don't know. I don't think that's inherently a bad thing. I think it's kind of fun.
Was that Wolfenstein game like that? I don't know. I never got to play it, but I've heard it's got a bit of that.
Oh, it is. I guess it's heavy-handed. I think Wolfenstein: The New Order. I've played that game through probably 6 or 7 times. it's easily in my top 5 favorite games, and it's definitely my favorite game of the last 2 or 3 years. Off the top of my head, anyway. And its politics are excellent. And then Wolfenstein: The New Colossus isn't as good a game, but it is the best movie that came out in 2017, bar none. Those games do an excellent job of exploring the personal ramifications of Nazi ideology in small communities, and like the toll that it takes on people. And like, if like it's there, those games have no right to be as good as they are. But I've played both of them through a number of times, and they're excellent. They're excellent.
I did a Steam search, and I'm sure this has happened to you before. I was like, oh, I should probably get that game sometime. And then I looked at it, I'm like, oh, I somehow already have it. So
that's how it always is with like Humble Bundles and Steam sales and all of these other things. It's like half the time when I see a game, like somebody talking about a game that came out a little while ago, I'm like, I wonder if I have that. And I'm almost more surprised when I don't, especially if it's older than like 4 or 5 years. But you should absolutely get The New Order.
I have the New Order. I don't have the New Colossus.
Yeah. It's also like The New Order is just like, they're both, that entire series is really over the top, but The New Order is just like, besides the fact that it's like emotionally very powerful and about very real human trauma, it also involves, there's a point where you shoot Nazis on the moon, as Mia Mulder just pointed out. Like, you go to the moon and you shoot Nazis. What more do you want? You also go into a concentration camp at a certain point. You spend a pretty significant chunk of time in a concentration camp. And I think it's done very well. And it does, the idea of a mainstream AAA video game spending time in a concentration camp and actually showing how filthy and awful it is really ballsy.
It's interesting because it's like, typically in pop culture, there are two, like if you're going to do sci-fi and alternate history and Nazis, there are two routes to go down. And Wolfenstein seems to be like that meme where it's like the Coke and Pepsi in the same cup, where it's like goofy space Nazis and like actual horrible racist Nazis. And it's like,
yeah. Well, the thing is, it works because the whole thing is predicated on the idea of like they've, their technology is advanced, and they're just, there's a goofiness to it, but their goofiness is also part of what makes them so terrifying. I do think it sometimes plays into the trope of like the cold, calculating, efficient Nazi that is more based on their own propaganda than actual historical precedent. But it's still like, I think it's excellent. I don't know. It's
all
like,
right.
it's good stuff.
I'll put it on my list because now that as I can say to you guys all in chat, I no longer have a day job. I decided to, for the first time since I want to say 2013, I might have the occasional evening and weekend. So I might want to chew down on some Wolfenstein and not just spend ridiculous amounts of hours playing Dwarf Fortress, which is my current life. My video game du jour.
That's so exciting.
Yeah. So the next question is, how similar is the concept of Dutch disease to that of a banana republic? They are both very similar. One is used for external purposes, and one is a thing that economies kind of do on their own.
Okay, interesting.
All right. Now this one, real broad question, great one to dig into. Does ending capitalism improve humanity? Yup.
Yeah. Yes. I think the broader answer there is yes. There is a implied, much larger, more terrifying question that's inherent to that, is like, what is the path to ending capitalism? And that's where things start to get really sticky, because yes, the end goal is quite like, yeah, you improve humanity, but it's hard to imagine the abolition of capitalism without significant violence happening at some point or another. And I'm not necessarily advocating for that, and I don't know what that looks like, but it's sort of like there's an intimidating factor to it, you know.
Yeah, I'm starting to get that feeling too, and I'm a pacifist, so that's even scarier. Yeah. But yeah, basically, how do you get there? And your answer to that is basically about what color you put on this side of the flag here.
Yep.
I dug out this old thing. I bought this in undergrad, and I found it when I was getting flags for a party, and I was just like, yeah, this is going on the wall.
Heck
yeah. You know, there's like in like a more like personal stance to it. Think about the low-lying feeling of anxiety that everyone just has. The constant, like, if you are not constantly performing and competing better than others, that you'll end up homeless and worthless and dead. And just imagine what it would be like to wake up without saying, if I screw up, or without thinking, if I screw up today, I won't have food or shelter or the basics.
I just had to ask for money through a GoFundMe to pay for medication so that I can get back to work on my own stuff. I haven't released a video in a little while, and like I am constantly in fear of so many things, and sometimes it hits me just how unnecessary it is when I think about just in my own state the wealth of oil barons and football coaches of all things. Like I think about the idea of like if you taxed Jeff Bezos 99% of his wealth, he would still have over $1 billion left over. Like if you gave me a single $1 million, I wouldn't know what to do with most of that money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Before we get too far from the point, can you DM me the link to that GoFundMe? I'll put it in the chat.
Oh, it's actually the goal has been reached.
Okay.
Thank you for that. I was surprised by how fast that it reached its goal. I'm very thankful for that. But if you have money to spare, I suggest donating it to trans people in your area, or just search the tag trans crowdfund on Twitter and find some people who are in need of help, because always are. Healthcare for trans people in the States ain't great.
I'm actually like, I sometimes like forget about that for a while, and then realize, like, then I come back and I'm like, oh yeah, like I forgot that there's like this really amazing community of trans people helping each other out with their medical costs, and like they do it through things like GoFundMe and such.
Government ain't gonna do it. Yeah.
Not even if you're a prison. Not if you're a prisoner.
No. Yeah, it's a nightmare. But I also like I have a level of clout and success now where when I ask for help, I get some visibility. That's not true for a lot of folks. And so I would recommend to not just donate when people like you see it happen, but like if you have money, like try to set aside money a little bit each month to like donate to things, and like troll the tags on Twitter and see who is asking, and find people who aren't getting as much visibility. And even do that anyway if you don't have any money, and just retweet their GoFundMes. Do what you can. Like this is the thing is when you create a network of support, you're able to create more connections between people and create more of a safety net, and like you start setting up norms. And this is how on a smaller scale you make a big difference, because you think about the low level cloud of stress that one feels all the time under capitalism. And it's like once within 2 days of starting my GoFundMe, it hit its goal. That was such a huge relief to me. And I thought that I wasn't sure if it was going to happen. And I've just been kind of sitting here like, oh my gosh, that's such a huge weight off of my shoulders. And I didn't even realize how big it was. Logan Anderson in the chat just said the circle of poor people giving each other the money they hardly have. Yeah, absolutely. Like the poorest people, the people who can least afford to give money are the ones who are the most consistently giving, which is a shame considering how many obscenely wealthy people there are in the world who will donate millions of dollars to charitable organizations that have questionable actual benefits on the world. But if you give money to a person, that's a tangible effect on a single person. You know, that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah. So like and that I would say that I would argue, now this isn't like a 100% thing, but I would say like look at how many people these days have anxiety or depression or all of the above. And a lot of this can be tied to just the constant shock, the constant drain on the system that living under capitalism does. And it would just be nice for, like, if anything, like psychologically, emotionally, ending capitalism would just feel so freeing. Yeah. Imagine thinking like, if you don't like your job, you can walk away and do a different one.
Yeah.
Or
just the freedom to explore things, whatever you want to do, and live the life that you want to lead, and know that your needs are taken care of. And the thing is, like, problems aren't going to go away. And I have questions about what the world actually looks like. And there are criticisms to say that like the utopia is unrealistic. But my counterpoint to that is that we are surrounded by dystopic narratives. We have seen countless iterations of apocalypse, and we know what our imagination is inundated with extremely cynical narratives about how we are going to lose. And even if it's unrealistic in whatever sense that you take that word to mean, having the ability to dream of a better future is so important. And to like hold that into your mind. Because if you've decided that it's not possible, you're not going to fight as hard for it. And if you have that in your head to hold on to, like every step closer to that dream is better. And like, no matter how many things you win, you want to keep fighting. There should never be a point where it's like, it's good enough here. Like, okay, we've got universal basic income and Medicare for all. That's basically it. We've done it. No. You've just put things off. Like that should be a stepping stone to relieve some pressure, to get more people on your side so that you can then further. Because like UBI has a lot of issues, as Andrew Yang has it, where I think it's a bandage on capitalism. I don't think that it really it'll solve things in the short term, but it's not a long-term solution in my opinion. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Especially because I think Andrew Yang's plan, the freedom dividend or whatever, requires that you opt out of social services in order to take it.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah, it's so that people who feel like they don't benefit at all from social services can opt out and get their $1,000 a month. Oh yeah. That's way more gross.
That's a nightmare. God, leave it to a corporate shell bullshit like that. Jesus, yikes.
Yeah, and I get a lot of. So basically, Star Trek socialism is where we're going here.
Yeah.
We need more Star Trek, and not like Star Trek Discovery, but like Next Generation-y.
Yeah, just more like utopia, like actually chewing on the ideas and just sitting and talking and like imagining what a good future looks like, you know?
Mm-hmm. I wish that because the thing is, like, most of the time in culture, when times are rough, that's usually when the media is the most positive because it's an escapist thing. And then when things are good, we kind of imagine the end and everything gets more dystopian. And we seem to be like in the opposite of that right now, where things are bad and they're all cynical and dystopian. And that's just the worst of all worlds.
It is. Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to a happy question. Yeah. How important is going to college and university for someone like me who is 35 and wants to learn more despite the increasing debt?
There are a couple of different ways to answer that question. the first thing that I would say is probably don't, because it's like you said, it's a lot of debt to take on. If you don't have a way to pay for it, if you don't have like there are a lot of like scholarships you can track down for people who are over 30. They tend to be kind of competitive, but you can find them. And it depends on like if you're going in for a degree that has some kind of like career path that you think seems logical, like that might be. The thing is that there's not really any career path that remains unmolested by the problems of capitalism now. There's no degree that you can get that guarantees you a job unless you're very willing to sell your soul. I'll tell you my perspective on college, though. For me, I started like I was a dropout in high school, basically. I hated school and I didn't ever want to go back, and I barely actually graduated from high school. I think it was on a technicality. I'm still not sure how it happened. But I was on my own for a couple of years, and I had a really, really, really bad time, and recognized that like my only choice was to go to college. Or I had some family members saying that I should join the military, but that was never my thing, thankfully. I could have easily fallen down that rabbit hole, but like I went to college, and then I was in college for 8 years doing my undergrad, because I like changed majors once and I took 2 years off at various points. But I racked up a lot of debt in that process, and my logic there was that I don't know what else to do with myself, because I have yet to find anything that makes me feel fulfilled. And now I have this pretty large specter of debt hanging over my head. And I know for a fact that I'll never be able to pay it off. And my feeling is on the debt question that this is such a universal problem among young people in this country. Like just having this staggering amount of university debt. It is inconceivable that we will have any kind of future without mass debt relief.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of where my head is at these days. I think, like, I'm of the opinion that Medicare for all at this point is more or less inevitable. It's just a matter of whether it happens in the next 4 years or the next 8 years, in my opinion. And I think mass debt relief goes hand in hand with that, because we can't. This is an entire generation of people, of which I am a part, who just has tens of thousands of dollars of debt hanging over my head. Like that's not sustainable. It's illogical and it's pointless. And like, I think that's there's a degree to which it's just like. The other thing is, I was careful. I only ever took out federal loans. I never took out any private loans. Private loans are the scary ones. So if you want to go to college and you don't see another path for yourself, and you are willing to take the bet of debt, then do it. Because I loved college. I kind of missed it. And like, if you're not going for a strict career path, go for something that you care about. Don't do it because you feel obligated. Do it because you want to do it. Do it for the right reasons. Make sure you don't have any regrets, even when you have 50, 60, 90, $100,000 debt. Hopefully you don't have that much debt going on you. Like, yeah. My debt is oversized because I took so damn long, but
yeah. To kind of speak into that too, it depends upon what the purpose of the college or university that you want to do is. Yes. Like if you are going for general enrichment, you have more resources than anyone's ever had to just learn for learning's sake. But if you want to go into if you want to like increase your career, there's I would probably say if you're just looking for something to pay the bills, vocational school's really got to be where maybe best shot, maybe. The other thing I wanted to talk about is there was an AARP article that came out recently that is about people now are now starting to get to the point where people are facing retirement who also still have student loan debt. Just to show how bad that's going to get, is like millennials are going to be in their like 60s and 70s and they're still going to have student loan debt.
Yeah. And it's there's no way, you just can't see any way forward. Like there's not a chance. And then of course there's a lot of people saying like, well, if it's why did you go to college if you felt like you couldn't, if you knew you couldn't pay off that debt? We're in a culture that like the secure jobs are vanishingly hard to find, and we're just trying to make our way through. And everybody is saying that like, well, you got to get a degree. That's what you need to get a job. And so you get there's just this cascade of decisions that we're being pressured to make by a larger culture. And it's like to an extent, I know a lot of people who didn't go to college and they're still working the same really, really bad, unfulfilling job that they were working 10 years ago. And they're probably not even getting paid as much as they were then. Like, it's not great. It's not great for anybody. I don't know. I think like I took a very grim, my position on college kind of changed a little bit once I came out and started transitioning, because before that I was very much somebody who didn't believe that I was going to live into my 30s. So I kind of took a very haphazard, like, what the heck, I'll have fun until I get bored attitude. And now I have something to live for, and I'm looking at that debt like, couldn't have found a cheaper distraction. But also, like, I learned a lot in film school. I met a lot of great people, and I don't regret the experience. So pros and cons.
Yeah. Okay. This is a question. By the way, you can opt out of these questions if you'd like, because some of these are a little personal, and so I don't want you to feel like you're on the gun. This one is, if you say you lived in an extremely misogynistic society like Saudi Arabia, or like maybe like Afghanistan at the peak of the Taliban's rule, or even worse, would you have still wanted to transition?
The shortest answer is that it's impossible to know, because societal factors have a huge impact on gender identity. Having the language to describe your gender is a huge thing, and having a path that you can imagine forward for transition is huge. I know of some trans people who are there. I know there was at some point like a large trans community in Egypt. And I know it's all, I mean, being transgender is just a universal fact of biology, but I don't know whether I would want to transition, because the thing is, it's easy to say like, I'm transgender and I would like my gender identity isn't negotiable, and things like how I am is how I am, whatever. But part of my ability to transition does come from like the social circumstances that I'm in right now. Hold on, sorry, the dog is being mean again. Okay, go. Don't come begging on my door again. Okay. All right, sorry.
Well, maybe to like, sorry, finish your thought.
Yeah, basically just that I would whether I would want to transition would depend a great deal on my own personal safety. I don't think it's true that anybody who comes out to themselves as trans should transition necessarily. I think everybody should, but that doesn't mean everybody can. And each person knows their own situation. And like sometimes if you're in like a really conservative town and you're still living with your parents and you have nowhere to go and no one to turn to, you don't have a ton of options. And sometimes you just got to like take what you can get with what you have. So if I'm imagining myself in that position, I'd like to think that I would still want, I would definitely still want to transition if I came out to myself at all. But would I? Would I try to? I don't know. I might be afraid to. There is a degree of like the coercive element of violence, and I don't know. I don't know how brave I am in the face of that. I've never had to face that kind of thing. I've lived a relatively privileged life, so like the very real threat of misogynist violence against a trans person, against me, if I were to transition, like that might pressure me to stop from coming out. I don't know.
To maybe make it a little bit more of a microcosm and kind of make it something more that you probably have considered, which would be like when you knew that you were going to publicly transition to becoming a woman, that like that involves a step down on the gender hierarchy of the way that the world works. Like how did that kind of aspect of what you would have to go through your head?
Well, the thing is, I never felt.
Sorry if that's like a really like invasive question or something like that.
No. It's a valid question. I'm trying to figure out how I want to answer it. There's a big because it kind of crosses over a couple of different debates. One of which is the idea of being raised with male privilege. The idea that like trans women before transitioning, they were socialized male, and therefore were raised with male privilege, and then they're downgrading by transitioning into being a woman, and that's in the strictest sense that's true, but it's not as though 2 years ago I came out to myself and that's when I started being trans. Mm-hmm. I was alienated from my body pretty much the minute that I hit puberty, and the result of that, looking back, I didn't recognize this at the time. I just thought I was depressed and broken. Looking back, I see how much that strained my ability to engage in social activities and just the culture at large. I did not feel right in masculine spaces and male spaces. I did not feel a part of like the idea of I had male privilege and I was aware of it, and I went through my own sort of like SJW education in my early 20s, but still, I felt by the time that I transitioned, it didn't feel like I was downgrading, because I had, for most of my life, felt like I was already sort of at the bottom of the barrel and was like left behind on some level. And like transitioning for me was a process of taking power back and like owning who I am and like actually understanding who I am and what my relationship with myself is. And finally, like addressing the fundamental disharmony that was making my life so hard for the majority of my 20s. So the fear that I see some people feel of like losing privilege, I didn't have as much of that. I'm starting to see it some now. There have been times when I'll like, because I still, part of it is that I don't really pass yet. And I don't really go out in full like makeup and everything. I generally take like a kind of a gender queer look in general. I'm not so much interested in the high femme look. Even when I've gone out, like I've only gone out with makeup and everything a handful of times, and HRT, if you're in America, chances are you're on spironolactone, which is diuretic, which makes you have to pee all the time. So there've been times I've gone out with friends in makeup to see a movie, and I'll have to go to the bathroom, and every single time I remember, oh right, which bathroom do I go into? Because I'm in Oklahoma and I don't pass and I'm wearing full makeup. Neither one is a great option if somebody sees me. And so that sort of thing freaks me out. There was a point where I was walking home after a day at school that I'd gone out like wearing a wig, wearing full makeup, basically in protest to something that had happened in the state that day. And I walked home because I missed my bus, and I suddenly felt watched, and I wasn't sure from where. And I would just recognize like, oh, the sun's down, it's dark, I'm kind of going down this dark street, even though it's like a main thoroughfare in the town. There was just like this weird thought, like I'm a potential target of violence right now, and this like I became aware of a privilege that I'd lost to some extent. So there are little things like that, and I recognize those things, but I don't see it as a loss, because and so my sister-in-law, we had a big family reunion this past Thanksgiving, and it was a big time for me because it was the first time that most of my family had seen me since I came out and started transitioning, and the first time any of them knew me as Sarah. So I was like still really, really on the emotional extremes of like being on HRT in the first few months. So I warned my sister-in-law, hey, I just want you to know I'm probably going to be pretty emotional during this trip because it's a big thing for me that you are all going to be calling me Sarah, or that I'm going to make you call me Sarah, and get mad if you don't. And I haven't seen a lot of you people in a very long time, and I'm going to be emotional. So just be ready for that. And she kind of flew off the handle a little bit at me saying that because she has like a 6-year-old daughter. And so she was thinking that I was going to act like her 6-year-old daughter and like go full on wailing and screaming, and turned it into this like, I just think you're being rash in your decision to transition because I was fired from my library job recently for being a woman, basically for being too emotional. And that's a thing that it just happens to her. She's a librarian in Kansas and got fired for getting a little bit too emotional at one point because of conservatism and her being a pretty far left person in Kansas. And she said, like, I just don't understand why you would want to be a woman. And I kind of think that you're throwing a lot away. And I felt really offended at that. Like having somebody in your own family, and she's somebody that I talk to a lot and that I look up to, having her tell me that my decision was frivolous and that I was making myself into like a more vulnerable, worse person. And she just couldn't understand why I would want to. And said at one point she deployed the stereotypical welcome to being a woman statement. And that's the sort of attitude that I like equate that question with, is seeing the material consequences of transitioning and not recognizing like she's assuming that I don't see how dangerous and painful it can be to be a woman in the world that we live in today. And my counterpoint to that is, no, I do see, and it is still preferable to what I was before.
That was a really good answer.
Glad to please.
No, I learned a lot in that whole exchange. And you just intersected the fuck out of that.
Well, that's sort of that's what my podcast is about. So it's sort of, that's my wheelhouse. This is what I'm used to talking about.
You've done this one a few times. Okay. The next question we got here is thoughts on getting corporate sponsorship out of Pride events. Just read an interesting article about the subject on Truth Out.
Oh gosh.
Only the easy questions here.
Yeah.
Don't worry, the next one's about Wolfenstein.
Oh, cool. I honestly like. So I've actually never been to a Pride parade. I wanted to go this year, but the morning of, I was feeling like sick and didn't want to go, and it was like 95 degrees outside. I don't have much experience going to Pride, and I definitely don't have much experience with like how corporate sponsorships work or who's responsible for letting those things in. So when you're talking about material solutions, I'm not the person to ask that question. I think that the presence of corporations is demeaning because it is, again, them attempting to co-opt our existence as a way to make money. They wouldn't do it if it wasn't profitable. And yes, there is there's an element of it that's like, hooray, we're accepted, except we're not. We're accepted enough. I gave the most recent episode of my podcast actually was a recording of a conversation that I had with an undergrad class a few months ago about how the existence of transgender people kind of undermines the existence of capitalism and like the foundations of Western civilization in general. It's sort of a long reach as an argument. But the idea is that we have these basic categories like man and woman that are sort of at the root of how we conceptualize society. And when you undermine that firmament, there's a reason why so many trans people are really radical leftists. And it's because once you've started like occupationally crossing these fundamental borders in our culture, you realize that all of them are kind of fake. And I think there's an inherent transgressiveness to being queer that capitalism and like liberalism especially wants to co-opt and like reintegrate into the system as it stands today to make it profitable and digestible to a larger audience. So they basically like they co-opt LGBT existence and they turn it into, this is what is acceptable as an LGBT person. They sanitize it. They remove the difficult aspects of it, the politically revolutionary aspects of it. And that's why I think it's so frustrating to see corporations at Pride, because it's a symbol of the fact that the process of reincorporation is working in their favor. It's them successfully co-opting, because they don't give a shit about whether we like that they're there or not. They give a shit about the optics to the bunch of people who don't know any LGBT people, but they are hashtag pro LGBT. And that's all that matters to them. And like, I support LGBT people. And then you have somebody saying like, yeah, but what about, and of course my brain can't come up with any like specific examples because it's been a long day and a long week and a long year. But I just think that there's a fundamental root of radical resistance in being a part of any marginalized group that it's pointless to attempt to divest yourself of, because ultimately when the chips fall, and if fascism rises and we see like widespread discrimination happening from on the government level, or at least government endorsed, again, they walk back those rights every single time. And I don't know. I just don't think corporations should be there. But I'm just like, I'm an ideological activist in this. I don't have much experience in it.
So be gay and do crimes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's an excellent way to put it.
The next question is, any chance of me streaming Wolfenstein? Maybe. I have played about the idea of dusting off the old Twitch account and doing something with it, but would it be fun? Is Wolfenstein a fun game to stream?
I think so. I think it would be. It's a fun game. It would incite very big reactions from you for sure.
Awesome.
If you're the sort of person who sees like graphic violence done onto unrepentant Nazis and be like, whoa, then yeah, there'll be a lot of that sort of happening in a live stream.
Sweet. All right. Now, next this is from Gad Uriv. If Bernie is elected, do you think he has the ability to join the U.S. to the International Criminal Court so they can persecute Trump for crimes against humanity? Yes. If there's anything, if the president has most power over one particular thing, it's foreign policy, and that would just really depend upon who Bernie's Secretary of State is. To see Trump go up on the ICC would be great on multiple levels.
Yeah, that's something I literally know nothing about International Criminal Court or how that works. So
it's basically supposed to be. It was set up as a reaction to the genocide that happened in Yugoslavia. But basically, it gets a lot of shit from the third world countries because they basically think it's just an organization that's designed to attack African leaders because they never prosecute really when white people do war crimes.
That's funny. What a funny coincidence.
Yeah, so it would actually mean quite a lot to put like George Bush or Trump on the ICC. I feel like George Bush should go in front of the ICC more than Trump at this point.
Yeah.
Because Trump has committed crimes against humanity, but nowhere near like the thing is, like, Trump has, you know, inshallah, one more year left of his presidency. And at the current rate he's at, pending like there's no war with Iran, he will not be able to come close to the amount of damage that George W. Bush did.
Yeah.
And we kind of lose perspective of that.
Yeah, there's a question of how much damage he's done to the institution of the United States and like our credibility. And you think about like what reason would Iran have to go to return to a nuclear deal with us after Trump just sort of pulled us out of it? Like our deals are no longer worth anything if it all it takes is a moody president to come in and revoke them. So, but in terms of like, that's the thing is like, that's a hypothetical question of what kind of long-term domino effects does that have on the world stage, and what kind of like conflicts could that lead to? Not that I guess that sort of inherently is embracing the idea of this, of America as the world cop. So I don't know. You're right that like in terms of direct damage, though, that Bush has absolutely been more harmful.
I would say that there would actually, because like one of the things that Sanders said during the debate is that one of the first things he would want to do is repair America's relationship with the United Nations. And there would be no bigger like olive branch to the international community, especially the United Nations, if they were to put George Bush and Donald Trump before the International Criminal Court for crimes against humanity. That would be the amount of, that would be like the first instance of America going like, we're no longer like the exceptional state, and like we are beholden to the same laws. That would be like, it would fundamentally change the balance of world power in a very positive way. So yeah. Sorry, that got out of hand. The next question, actually, this one I really wish I had a good answer for, because I don't know of any, but maybe you do. Rebecca Castro wants to know if we know of any physically disabled bread tubers.
Bread tubers like us, I don't know. There are people who do. There are 2 deaf video essayists that I know of off the top of my head, and I haven't seen enough of their stuff to remember their names. I will have to dig them out. I don't know about like people in a wheelchair, people who have missing limbs or anything like that. I don't know. Not off the top of my head. Yeah, it's really unfortunate. This is the thing, is that I can think of some YouTubers who are very specifically like disabled, but that's their entire subject as a channel is discussing like disability. And I think what I'm imagining Rebecca asking for is like people who make videos who are disabled, but they're not necessarily making videos about disability. I don't know. Like I'm a transgender person making videos sometimes about being transgender, but also most of the time not being about transgender, but I don't leave out my gender from the conversation, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. BreadTube's got a pretty bad diversity problem in general, and this is definitely another aspect of that. Because basically, from what I can guess, is that it's pretty hard to not be a cis hetero white man and be on YouTube and not have it be a constant drain on your mental health and also potential danger to your physical health.
Yep.
Okay. Utopian Visions. Have you ever read anything by Ian Banks?
No.
Yeah, me neither. Sorry.
Yeah.
What do you guys think of the universal dividend that they have in Alaska? So that's it's a UBI adjacent type program that's run in Alaska.
Yeah.
Mostly it's given because most Alaskan land is federal territory, and so they can't own the land they live on, so they get like money from the government to.
I know absolutely nothing about it, so I don't really have an opinion.
I feel like it's a thing I should know, but I don't, which makes me a bad Americanist.
Yeah. Americanist.
Yeah. That's what they call American Studies majors.
Oh. Huh. Interesting.
I do have I have my MA in American Studies, so they can technically call myself an Americanist.
Wow, interesting. Never heard that term before. Neat.
All right, the next question. Okay, this one might be in a little bit of bad faith, so you can feel free to say pass. But you asked people to donate to transition surgery. Wouldn't their money be better spent donated to people with chronic conditions who might die because the U.S. has no universal health care?
Why can't we both?
Yes.
You can don't just like both are equally helpful. And this is the thing, is that a chronic condition that's slowly killing you, that is like a direct antagonist on your nervous system, that's one thing. People who are trying to transition and can't afford medication, or who are trying to afford even something that seems as frivolous as facial feminization surgery, dysphoria is still just as much an antagonist on your nervous system as anything else. It may be not directly killing you, but it is making it very hard for you to engage with yourself and your life on a day-to-day scale. Like, it's up to you to choose where your money goes. And ideally, if you're at a position where you're like, well, I have this money allotted, like, give some to trans people, give some to people who have, like, give to as many different kinds of people as you possibly can, because it's absolutely pointless trying to play suffering Olympics here and say who is more deserving of aid. Everybody deserves aid as much as they need, but the government isn't giving it to us. So we have to help each other. And unfortunately, a lot of times that comes down to who do you know, who is in your circle. But that has to be good enough for us right now. Find the people that like do what you can with what you have. And if that means like it's different for everybody. This dog. I'm going to ignore the dog getting animated. Okay, I guess I'm not ignoring the dog. Jeez, sorry.
It's all right. Dogs never do bad things. All dogs are beautiful, so it's okay.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay, but yeah, that's a good answer. Like, it's kind of like when in social justice spaces trying to play the oppression Olympics too. Like the idea that there's hierarchies of suffering and hierarchies of oppression is the counterproductive discussion, and that we should be, we should be helping each other out.
Yeah, and the thing with like GoFundMe and like giving aid to people, it's unfair. Fundamentally, it's unfair. Who has a GoFundMe is based on who has access to the internet. Who gets funded is based on who arbitrarily picks up that GoFundMe. Mine got funded in 2 days because I have a YouTube channel with a relatively large subscriber base, and I have a Twitter following that's relatively large. I have the clout to ask for money and get it. That's inherently unfair. But that's kind of where we're at. like the world is not fair in this regard. Who gets the money? Like, somebody who is dying deserves help just as much as anybody else. But trying to equivocate as to who should get the money and who doesn't deserve the money they got is ultimately a waste of time, because it's not solving the problem. It's being petty about who got what. Like, if we don't fix it, in this case with the United States, if we don't fix the fact that we do not have a safety net for people with any sort of chronic condition, that we don't have Medicare for all, this entire conversation is just going to repeat ad infinitum until we're all dead. Like, help who you can when you can. Just because I give money to one person on the street does not mean that I hate every other person who's on the street that I can't give money to. It just means that that's who I was able to access at that moment in time. And what we should be doing is looking at the structural problems that put that person in the position in the first place and attacking that.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Because there is enough resources and stuff to help everyone. It's just
Absolutely.
Just that 3 people in the United States have it all.
Yeah, exactly.
We just need to liquidate them.
Yes, absolutely. One way or another.
What's it called? We'll make we'll make a rocket ship called the John Galt, saying we're sending them to a new SpaceX thing on Mars, and it makes a pit stop by the sun.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next question is, what about people who drop out of university because they have physiological issues that make it hard for them to be, I think psychological issues was the thing that was supposed to be there, that make it hard for them to be mentally organized to keep up with essay assignments and such? Like, yeah, that there is definitely a mentally ableist aspect to the way that we treat accreditation in education.
Mm-hmm. I have diagnosed ADHD and bipolar 2 disorder, and I didn't get those diagnoses or start receiving treatment for them until about 2 years ago. So I had a very hard time through undergrad for the vast majority of it without knowing. Like, I struggled. I took years off. It took me 8 years to finish my undergrad, in part because I had to go at my own pace, and this was struggling against a lot of administrators trying to tell me, no, you need to do it this way. And I'm saying, if I try to do it the way that you're wanting me to do it, I will die. And I was just like, I guess I have enough of like a force of will that like I just don't care, and I just did what I wanted, and nobody stopped me. My whiteness might have something to do with that, but like, people who I've known people who just like they can't keep up with it and they've had to drop out, and yeah, that sucks, and that's a real thing. And I think there is a lot of pressure on college students to finish as fast as possible, and to go into college as soon as you leave high school, which I think is absolutely a mistake. I don't think anybody should go to college before like 22.
Yeah,
I think
18-year-olds are not ready for university.
No, absolutely not. And so that's too much pressure for anybody. And a lot of that has to do with like the fact that capitalism has sort of invaded those institutions and just wants workforce in a very specific field. And also a lot of like the public institutions like here in Oklahoma are like research, and they use undergrad as a way of subsidizing a lot of partially to subsidize their football stadiums and teams, but also their grad school research, because that's the part that they really give a shit about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also have ADHD, and I did not find out about it until I went into my master's. And so I think I'll make a video about this at some point in the future, because I have this second channel that I don't use, and I have had way too many non-history ideas. But yeah, I graduated high school kind of in the same way that you said, like on a technicality, and also blew all of the school savings trying to become a record producer. So I had to reboot my life when I was like 20 and with nothing. And I will say, it's real hard. Capitalism does not let you make mistakes.
No, not at all. I've been unbelievably lucky to get where I am right now. I cannot deny the privileges that I've had, because I've been at the end of the rope a couple of times in a couple of different ways. And to an extent, I was able to muscle through my own like mental disability to graduate. But like, there does need to be more of an allowance for people with like mental disabilities in education and in everything. Really, this is a problem that goes like, it's everywhere, and I don't know how to address it.
Again, it's the maxim of from each according to their ability and to each according to their need.
Yeah,
that's a good basic to go by, and like that's not like a difficult way to. It's not a difficult. I don't know it's such a difficult concept to wrap everyone's heads around.
Yeah.
But, all right, we have about 6 minutes left and 3 questions.
Oh.
So let's do these and let's see where we go.
Okay.
So first one here. Some ancients didn't think there were 2 genders. They thought women were defective men. Would it be possible to know you're a trans person if you've been raised to think that there's only really one gender? Oh my, that's like next level.
Maybe not. You might notice a disharmony. You might notice something wrong. You might not. There are different degrees of transness. Different indigenous cultures have third genders and a multitude of genders and different roles associated with those genders. I believe that there is a biological phenomenon that is like being transgender, that is immutable, and like you can't get rid of us because we're part of the human population, same as like gay people generally. And how culture interprets that very much changes how you're able to transition or not. So yeah, maybe I wouldn't. I don't know.
It's interesting to think about antiquity and they're thinking that there is only one gender. That's like,
yeah.
Huh. Okay. Man, for these people that we're supposed to venerate all the time, people in the classical age had some fucking opinions, man.
Yeah, they had some real hot takes.
Plato would be a skeptic on YouTube, I think, if he was.
Absolutely.
Like if you think about like if you read like kind of the old Platon, like the whole like Platonic discussion, it's very much like he wrote plays about him owning people.
Yep. I know. They're so funny to read now with like YouTube in mind, and it's like, are you really? Is this what people have been going on?
The ancient Greeks invented the YouTube response video.
Yeah, they did.
Like literally, like I'm going to take this guy's play, and then I'm going to respond to his points in my play. Yeah. It's like this is a thing. Okay, Greece was what you would get if you had, or Athens is what you would have if you had a society that was where the skeptics ruled.
Yeah. Yikes.
Taken down by the Chads in Sparta.
Beautiful.
Yep. That's someone's gonna MS Paint that. Okay. How common is it for trans people to stick with their birth name, either because they had a gender neutral name or because they thought that gendered names were a silly idea?
I can't speak to how common it is. I would say it's uncommon. I think a lot of people, it's not even necessarily the gendered expectation that a name comes with, so much as it is your own life story that's associated with it. When somebody calls you the name that you were assigned at birth, they are addressing your life experience up until you started transitioning. And with that comes like, it's easy to fall into routines and like misgender people as a result of that. And I think like changing your name isn't just like, oh, I'm switching from John to Jessica. It's a matter of forcing people to remember that this is who you are now, and like taking control of how your identity is conceptualized. And it's so it is uncommon, but I do know a few people who didn't change their name due to gender neutrality, and that they I don't hate my birth name, and as I'm approaching a point where I'm going to change my name legally, I'm considering how I want to deal with that, because I don't want to get rid of it. I have like specific history attached with that name, and I don't want to like throw it away because I'm emotional. So I don't know. It's sort of like everything trans. It's a case by case basis.
Yeah, I can imagine like given how much paperwork it would be to change names, if you had a name like Taylor or Jordan or Shannon or Tanner or something like that, that'd be like, it's just easier this way.
Yeah, well, I know a lot of people who don't change their names legally at all, and they just colloquially go by. Eventually, that reaches a point of no return, or that reaches a point where you kind of have to, but it depends for everybody.
Okay, last question. All right, let's see. Okay. Are international deals meaningless to any country if they don't feel like there's a more powerful country that can make them follow it? Or is the US just especially untrustworthy?
Wow. Let's wrap this up in a minute or less. I am not a foreign policy wonk. I don't know enough about like how this works to have a really informed opinion. My feeling is that there might be a degree of like holding a gun to somebody's head to make them follow a deal. I don't know. Maybe that rings true. Maybe that doesn't. All I can speak to from the United States perspective is that if I understand that our ability to make deals with nations on the world stage involves the integrity of our word. If our word has no integrity, there's no reason for anybody to make a deal with us. And it doesn't matter who's in charge or how progressive that we've been, like there's a fundamental trust that's been broken. Now, the larger question for me is how important is that on the world stage in like geopolitics generally? And I cannot answer that because I do not know. And I don't want to venture a guess because I can't deny my own like imperialist upbringing, I guess. I've been raised in America. This is the only country I've ever known. So the propaganda has eaten into my brain in ways. And like when I'm talking about international relations, I realize all I know is what Americans have told me about America. So like I can't speak to that.
Fair enough. There is kind of like a international, I would say there's like a bit of an international anarchy where the size of your economy and military can really dictate to what degree you can violate international law and just kind of get away with it.
Yeah.
And the US has the biggest economy and the biggest military, so
yeah, I know that on a global stage we just sort of do whatever the heck we want.
But then sometimes like there's some serious repercussions, like the US going into Iraq with basically no international support has definitely damaged their reputation on the international scale. It's definitely the reason why the European Union went through such an effort to try and find ways to be an international force without relying on NATO allies in the United States and stuff like that. So it's a thing that's going to happen. Anyways, it's 5:02. This was a great stream. Nothing went down even once.
Yeah.
A miracle.
It's,
Um,
it's a July miracle, and it's still June.
Yep. So it's a Pride Month miracle.
Pride Month miracle. There we go.
So before we go, though, for everyone who wasn't around at the beginning, please say who you are, what you do, and where people can find all of your things.
Yeah. So my name is Sarah Zeddig. You can find most of my work on YouTube at the channel Let's Talk About Stuff. If you search like the politics of the McElroy brothers or a video about transitioning, you'll find two of my favorite videos that I've done. I also have a podcast called the Trans Questioning Podcast that comes out every Monday. Every other week is just me updating about my transition and whatever topics are on my mind. So a lot of times episodes will be basically like this conversation that we've been having, or it'll be every other week beyond that is like conversations with other trans or gender nonconforming people about their life experiences. Tomorrow I have a new episode coming out with Aisha Ufara, who is a writer and narrative game designer. I'm really excited. It was a good conversation talking about cyberpunk. And you can find me on Twitter at HMSNoFun, which is where I spend most of my time, sort of shamefully. And links to my everything is there at HMSNoFun. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on Subscribe Appreciation Day.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun.
It was a pleasure. And I will see everybody else, all you in the chat. We'll have another one of these at the end of July. I don't know the guest yet, but I have ideas.
Ooh.
All right. And so take care of each other, have fun. And if you're Canadian, enjoy the rest of this long weekend.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.